today's episode of the Indoencers podcast. Our guest today is an incredibly talented composer, singer, and multi-instrumentalist who has made a name for himself in the Indian independent scene through the ways in which he has so seamlessly integrated both Eastern and Western elements into his music. Having obtained qualifications from prestigious musical institutions such as the SAE Institute, the CAM Music Conservatory, and the Thornton School of Music in the University of Southern California, he has used that knowledge to develop a repertoire that covers genres from orchestral music through Indian classical music all the way to hip-hop and more. To speak about his journey up until today, I'm extremely excited to be joined by the man behind the Raga House initiative, Prashant Srinivas. Welcome onto the Indoencers podcast. It's an honor to have you on.
Thanks for having me and for that awesome introduction. It like each time you said something, it sort of added something into my head in terms of each place and each school and each institution. So it's always like whoosh over my head in terms of like all this information. But yes, cool. I'm like happy to help out and happy to add and share my experiences.
Well, the aim of this podcast is to help trigger a bit more of those flashbacks. So we'll take it
on
right.
Others or on myself?
No.
On myself.
For you for today.
Right.
So we'll take it right back to your earliest days. I've seen that the first ever cassette tape that you had was Pudhiya Mugam by A.R. Rahman sir. So
Yeah.
Would you consider that to be your earliest musical memory or perhaps something else?
As far as I remember, yes, because it was like, we had like this car when I was young. As far as I remember, it had like 3 audio tapes, of which one was like a Kerala film soundtrack, and one was this one, and one was Arulapati was like also like one soundtrack we had. So I remember I was like two years old as I like heard all this. And I was always told that I would stop crying and start snapping my fingers every time I would hear these songs. So I'm sure it's had an impact. It's just that I didn't expect that it'll translate into an actual job in the field of music. So that's essentially what the story is. So.
Yeah, and just speaking about the sort of environment that you were growing up in, I've seen that you have a cousin that plays the sitar. And so
Yes.
In general, how involved or engaged was your family with music as you were growing up? And how do you think they influenced your early musical tastes?
I think like it's true for all Tambram households. I think there's always some kind of an art form happening in like either like in your house or in the house opposite you. So there's always someone who's having an art inclination. So either it's going to be in the field of music or dance or something or the other. So we have like always had aunts' kids who have been doing this or uncles' kids who have been doing that. So I think they started me off on music classes at age 4, and then it stopped after a year because I think I wasn't as interested in that whole process. But I think as a family, my grandmom always sings, my aunt always used to sing, and always, we are sort of an audience of the art as compared to art makers ourselves. So I think I just thought that to make the art might also be awesome, only because if we're like sort of able to enjoy art so much, imagine how it would be to create the art form itself. So I think it's sort of like that is how it started.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about your Indian sort of musical influences with classical music and A.R. Rahman sir, Raja sir's music.
Right.
But I've read that your first musical influence from the West, probably like many other artists of that generation, was the Beatles. So what do you think their music brought to your viewpoint and perspective on music that you hadn't been exposed to already?
I think I started to hear them pretty late. So I started to hear them only, I think, at age 17 or something.
Mm.
And before that, it was only Indian music. So it was like only like Hindi and Tamil stuff and all that. So hearing them, it was a sort of a short view into how the other part of the world hears its music. And also, I think they like started off a lot of styles in the West. Probably after Elvis and the early eras, it was the Beatles who had sort of changed the way that people like hear music all over the world. And also they had a lot of Eastern influences as well in like all their tracks and in all their songwriting abilities. So I think I sort of found it easier to get attracted to them all because their songs also had that Eastern flavor and that Eastern touch. And also it was my first exposure to the West, so it's kind of added up quite easily. And I'm like a huge fan of Paul McCartney. Afterwards, like I just found out that he's sort of the kind of artist I'd like to be after I grow up, because all that he does is make music. I mean, like it's just like his like entirety of his life is just that. So even sort of after he's aged, it's been only that. So I find that to be incredible that he can do so much, and he's fast, he's quick, and he makes catchy tunes. So it's all like no, so he sort of inspired me a lot. And also I think all their songs had a lot of ease about them in terms of the kind of stuff that they're trying to say was very, very pure and like straightforward. Like I want to hold your hand is such a like straightforward thing to say, right? Like it's nothing to do with flowers falling from the sky in slow motion when the snow is intermixed with the clouds, and all that is like quite complicated Indian language to talk about the same thing. There is just I want to hold your hand. So it was quite awesome to hear that kind of an outlook towards all these thoughts and concepts. So yeah, that's that.
And speaking of sort of getting into different forms of music and, along your musical journey, I would say from what I've read and what I've seen that your sort of compositional journey or production journey probably started with your first piece of musical equipment, which was the Yamaha PSR 1100 keyboard. And you say
Right.
that this keyboard taught you to, quote, create music from nothing. So, what sort of impact do you think working with this keyboard had towards your later endeavors in music composition and music technology?
So to go back to my earlier thought of actually being able to create something from emptiness is something that I always was like quite like sort of been like quite sort of like inspired by. So almost like how artists always speak about the empty canvas. It's just like the starting of something that's blank. So the keyboard that I was talking about had this ability to record multi tracks at the same time. So which means if I had to like plan out a song, and if the song was 2 minutes long, I'll have to play each part on its own from start to end, and then stop, and then instrument two, instrument three, instrument four, instrument five, and so on. So for that, I found out that I had to have the plan of the track in my head from start to end from the empty canvas itself. So from the sort of empty canvas stage, I had to know the space into which each instrument is heading towards at each part of the song, and then have that recorded, and then do the next one, and then the next one, and then finally it will sound like a song. So I found that adding those elements into the song was something I enjoyed, because at the end of it, each time I would show it to somebody, he'll say, "Hey, it's a complete piece of music, and like it sounds awesome, and like it sounds complete, and so on." But I would feel that it's just all these elements, right?
Mm.
So adding them in was something that I found awesome in terms of like it was just like empty like half an hour earlier, and right now it has all these things in it. And also you hadn't had the option of stopping halfway through and editing the sound. It was pure. So if you've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, and like it sounds human, like almost like you're playing with your friends on stage, right? Because some people screw up and they make small mistakes, and it sounds like pure and organic. Like say if the speed of the track starts to slow down slightly, because I know that instrument also had no click track, so I was recording in the absence of a click track. So which means I would slow down and speed up slightly in sort of each aspect of the track. So I thought it was a sort of an exercise in controlling your head and sort of wrapping your mind around a whole song as compared to every small aspect of the song. So it's like the song has to be complete at the start of the process, and I found that to be quite challenging, I would say, at the start. So each song was new, each day was different, so it was nice.
Would you say, I mean, we're going to talk about your compositions a bit more in detail later on, but would you
Sure.
say your approach to composition today is similar in the sense that you plan everything out at the beginning and then you start putting it into practice?
I mean, it's a case by case thing. Apart from how I have evolved into the person I am now, I feel I'm more. I'm more attracted to the organic song approach as compared to the plan like only the verse and then plan only the outro and then plan only the chorus and then add them all up and you find that it becomes a song, because that sounds a little fake in my head, because it starts to feel like, it doesn't feel like an organism, it starts to feel like an exercise. And I think music has to be an organism that is alive, and if it needs to be alive, it needs to be human, it needs to be human, it needs to make mistakes, it has to be organic, it has to flow from say action A to B to C and so on. So I think, yeah, I think it has sort of inspired me in that sense to be true to all your mistakes and all your issues in every track.
Yeah, and just going back to your childhood again, and we'll move on to later on in your life, but as I stated in the introduction, you play multiple instruments today, including the keys, flute, and the guitar. So were these instruments that you played ever since your younger days, or were they instruments that you sort of developed and played around with as you started getting more and more into music?
Yeah, so I think as I had said earlier also that I started playing an instrument. I mean, I started playing the keyboards only at at age 17, so it was quite late in life. Before that, I had learned Carnatic music only to be able to sing. That was about 9 years of that. So instruments wise, I think it became easier for me to adapt to each of them, all because I've been like had Carnatic music help early on in life. And I think looking back at it in like hindsight, I think it was the fact that I was able to know the sound I was trying to make. I think it's like a very strange statement to say, but actually it means that even before you pick up the instrument, you know the sound you want from it. So it sort of makes it easier to train on the instrument instead of only practicing scales and only practicing arpeggios. You start to plan the sound that you do want from it. So which means if I'm sort of playing a flute, it's not in the same way that a flute player would play the flute. It's just the way that the song, I mean, it's sort of going towards where the song is asking you to head towards. So everything that I learned after that was only for applications of things at that time. Like say in engineering, I picked up the flute only to be a part of the Indian ensemble who hadn't had a flute player at that time. So it was like, so you have to do it only for that. And I picked up the acoustic guitar because I think it was undergrad and I wanted to be cool in college, and everybody wants to be cool in college and play the acoustic guitar. So it was for that. The pro- programming skills on the laptop was also because I felt towards the end of engineering that I want to do this as a job, and I found that the Apple computer and the software on that are what I want to use to have all those skill sets. So it's kind of like that, like it's sort of a flow that happens all through your life, and it isn't like I planned one day that I want to learn all these instruments.
But it's very interesting because it sort of goes, I don't want to say it goes against the traditional concept, but I think, traditionally it's sort of, particularly in the classical realm, it's like you learn an instrument properly and then you play it. But I think now, particularly with music producers, it's more about just getting a sound and just doing
Yeah.
what you need to in order to produce that sound.
And plus like and means like still I think I'm just like a very ordinary flute player, and I'm just like an okay keys player. I think I wasn't even chasing after being that sort of awesome flute player for life or awesome keys player for life. So I think the objective itself is something else. It is to be able to make your own sound all the time and to be able to customize it. And that also helps you sort of explore the instrument even more than what a normal flute player might. It's because if he spends the first 5 years of his life only playing scales, he doesn't know what a flutter effect is or what something else is in terms of a flute slide until 8 years into the process, and then is teacher is saying, yes, now it's okay to explore these slides and the flutters and so on. And so, I mean, I find it's great if you had the time. I didn't have the time because I started everything so late. So I was just like, accelerate and so on. So it was that. So I think it was all about I being in like a hurry to head further ahead and all that. Amrams also have this overachieving issue. So I think it was also that.
Absolutely. And probably along those lines of overachieving and sticking to what people want you to do, you didn't pursue music immediately, and you instead majored in computer science. And soon afterwards, you went on to work at the Bank of America, and you were doing an audio engineering course alongside your job. That must have been like extremely hectic, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first course that I was pursuing in music on my own, and I had already completed 4 years of engineering, and I was not okay to allow my parents to spend on my studies after that anymore. So I sort of felt that I have to earn my own cash to pay for like all my artistic aims henceforth. So I thought Singapore is a pretty high paying job market anyway, and especially in IT from an entry level standpoint, I was earning pretty well. It's sort of the highest I've earned ever actually. So it's pretty cool because I had about a couple of years of that. So after I had the opportunity to work there, I found out that I can pay for my own classes in the evenings. And Singapore actually isn't a very art hub kind of place anyway. It's more of a it's like more of a technology hub. So I thought it would be cool if I can enter into a sound engineering course there. And I found out about SAE, and then it was, I think, headquartered in Australia. So it is from there, and then they have a place in Singapore as well. So it was quite cool because the office job was from 8 to 6, and then 6 o'clock onwards, I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, I would be off straight from office, saying I have to head off early on these days. And then I would also have calls with the States after that in the evening because I used to work on the trading floor as well. So it would be 8 to 5 work, and then 6 to 8:45 or 9 off the program. And after that, I would be up for the States calls after that because they would be up only at that time. So like it was quite an active life for those 18 months. But all that was aimed towards the fact that I can sort of enter into the next stage of my life. And I found out about the AR Rahman school in that time, and I found out that all my skills as a sound engineer was going to help my speed of acquiring stuff even there. So I think it was sort of, I mean, it is all just so flowy, right? That it just all happened one after the other. So it's just that, I think it just happened, and you just need to keep working and just don't stop. And then it all appears awesome in hindsight. But as it was happening, it was just like, yeah, it was happening. But yeah, it was just that.
Yeah, and as you just mentioned, you soon took what you call your leap of faith, and you attended Rehman's Cam Music Conservatory. And this turns out to be quite a popular destination for prospective musicians. In fact, you're the third guest on this podcast alone who is a Cam graduate. So the first one was independent artist Edwin Lewis, who majored in audio engineering. And the second one was playback singer Abhijot Barkar, who specialized in Sufi music. You majored in Western classical music, which is an interesting choice given that you trained in audio engineering at SAE. So what drove you to major in Western classical?
So I think the sound. So I think all of the musicians who generally end up in our field, they start off in the arts space and they enter into the sound engineering space. I think I started off ulta. So I sort of started off in the sound engineering space because I was an engineer either way. So I thought I'd like close out the sound engineering stuff first, and after that enter into the Western classical world. So I hadn't had any exposure to the Western classical space at all. And I had in fact started to hear English music only from age 18, right? Age 18 or like 17. So I was like a totally out and out Indian music kind of guy. So I thought that if I and plus I found out that all of like after I learned more audio engineering and I also started to play more of the keys all through my engineering program in NTU. Also, I found that everybody else is aware of heavy metal and rock and pop, and EDM hadn't started then as actively, but like even like hip hop. So it was something that I felt very ignorant about, and I was like, I don't know any of this. So I had started to hear a lot of heavy metal and rock and pop and hip hop in college itself, and after which I found out that you need to also be able to create all those kinds of music if you would like to be a composer and like all of the styles of music as I like sort of aim to be. So I think Western classical music is historically the oldest form of Western music in the world. So I thought if you can train yourself in that, just like how they say that all of the Indian music comes from Indian classical music, I thought the same thing applies in the West. So so I just try to fight all the hard battles early on in life. So at least after that, it's more easier in that sense. So I think it was just that, like if you can expose yourself to the harder arts earlier on, it's just easier to adapt to all the other forms afterwards.
Yeah, and you reference Western classical music as a hard art for you, given that
Yes.
you grew up in a much more, Indian-based context musically.
Yes.
How difficult was it for you to embrace Western classical music, and particularly maybe some of the more obscure styles like, 20th century atonal music or something like that? Did that take time to get used to?
I think I think the advantage was that, as I said, I'd taken a leap of faith, right? So everything was from scratch. So I just said, I'm just going to allow the school to sort of handle every aspect of music education for me for the next couple of years. And in that sense, the school and the faculty were awesome in terms of how they handled that. Professors are all from overseas, and I mean, like, and especially professors like Adam. You might have heard of Dr. Adam Gregg. I mean, he is quite awesome at his style, and I mean, like, and then we have like history classes happening at the same time. So I think I had the chance to also enter straight into the second year of the program at KM. So I didn't have to do the first year of the program because of my sound engineering course and so on. So I think after that started, it was again all in the flow. Was so much information was thrown at me all at once in terms of like history of music and harmonies and operas and symphonies and string quartets, and also I think they planned it quite well, that they sort of accept that you're all like all of the students are sort of from India, so all of them have that Indian classical music training either way. So I think the staff also was able to understand that and like plan the program accordingly. So and I think I just chose to not think about my earlier Indian training at all. Actually, I think I just sort of ended up saying I don't know anything, and I'll just like start from scratch again. And after you start from scratch, you stop trying to think of it as, oh, it sounds Indian, oh, it sounds Western, oh, it sounds like a harmony, and you start to think of it like just accept information for now, and I will plan all of this after that. So I think the 20th century music is where you truly have to be open-minded, because I think until Tchaikovsky and I think early 20th century, it's still kind of acceptable because it's still the kind of music we hear in like Hindi films and Tamil films, and it's still the same chords and harmonies that like our like ear is open to accept. But I think as soon as it enters into Schoenberg and some like extremely obscure kinds of music, I think even he had a hard time to explain to his fans and audiences that all this is actually a sound that he wants us to hear. So if you kind of explore Schoenberg's history, you will also find that it. I mean, like it's not just us who didn't like his music; it's everyone at like his time as well. So I think that he had a hard time explaining that to his folks, and then after that you enter into the argument of saying that music is only for the intellectuals, and smart music and stupid music and music for the classes and the masses, and all these kind of arguments start to come into play. So I think it was an awesome experience for 2 years in which I sort of was able to have all these arguments internally and outwardly with like all my staff. And I've had enough of these arguments with like all my staff saying, I mean, how can you say that, it's still music and it's actually too intellectual, it's too smart. And like, how do you like understand all this? And then we argue back and it's like endless and it keeps going on and on. And after a while, you're like, okay, I like my music, you like your music, everyone's happy, it's good. I think it's sort of like that is how it ends up.
And when I've heard sort of musicians talk about their journeys, and I suppose, I mean, I'm not a musician myself, but like, yeah, I've sort of trained in music a little bit, and I think I can speak to this a bit from my own experiences as well. But when you take in a lot of information, it's very tempting to show everyone that you know it through your work. So like if you find out about a new, chord extension, for example, then, like every other chord will be like a 9 or a 13 or 11. So,
Yeah.
I mean, in that sort of space, how long did it take for you to gain that musical maturity to sort of put the complexities aside and sort of not be a show off and instead sort of use it when it's necessary and not at other times?
So the advantage, I mean, it's like a sort of it's like a sort of a pro and the con of being at KM is that everyone in KM, I think 85% to 90% of the people in KM are performance artists. So like they sing or they play an instrument, and they specialize in stage presence and stage performance and actually showing off their art form. The composers in KM are actually only a handful. So when sort of like I was there, it was maybe I and 4 or 5 others across who were actually only into composing music. So I think if you sort of treat yourself as a composer from the starting of your musical journey, you find out that showing off isn't even an option. Because to show off is only if you are a stage artist and if you always want to play and if you always want to show off your skill sets. Now, this thing that you're talking about, that if I've learned this add ninth chord, I'd like to show off the add ninth chord, I can find out that the entire school is able to play that add ninth chord way more awesomely than I'm able to play the add ninth chord. So who will you show it off to, right? So it isn't even about the add ninth chord, is what I slowly started to find out. And I think I had the opportunity to also score pretty well in that program because I was like sort of I just got awarded the best all-round artist student of the year for like a couple of years, and it was very, very odd for me only because I was not a stage performer. I was also an all-right stage performer as compared to the excellent ones who were always in the spotlight, always in the limelight. I just had the habit of putting my hands into everything. And I found at the end of year 1 that actually that helped a lot. So I found, so I was like the head of an a cappella ensemble at KM for a couple of years. So I found out about the a cappella. So fine, that's like an awesome sort of an example. So it's like almost like finding out a brand new chord, right? So I found out about the a cappella sound, and I started to play with it. And I found out that I can actually have an a cappella ensemble in KM because I was friendly with all of the other students. And as long as they know that someone else is handling all of the score writing, and all that they have to do is like come and sing and leave, it's easy for them. It's easy. It's like sort of like easy for me because I can like handle all these eight voices and have my soprano, alto, tenor, bass sides sorted. So I think it's like I think all of us are showing off in our sort of own ways at all points in time. It's just that when a composer shows off, it's more subdued and it's not as in your face as like a stage artist tries to show off. So like it might feel like I'm not showing off all the time, but I actually am, and like all of us are. Artists always are sort of trying to show off all the graphs, and it isn't even like the sort of end game is not to show off. I think that the end game is just to check if it works. So I think with what I did, it was like, oh, I found a harmony. Now how do I know if it works? I have to ask someone to hum it and sing it and check if it works on like the software or on or on like a stage show and so on. So I think it helped that I was doing everything all the time. Yeah, and I think like handling artists and handling egos on an everyday basis is like also quite an awesome experience, and it's sort of half of our job as a composer to just like come and speak to these amazing artists every day and inform them that you just need to sing what like I am asking you to sing and not sing whatever you know. So it's sort of all those small things that ends up happening. And but yeah, I mean like as long as the song sounds good, it's good. So it's okay. Showing off happens after the song is a hit, right? Because like if the song isn't a hit in the first place, then you can't show it off to anybody, and then you end up being like Schoenberg all the time. So you can't really do much after that. So it's one of those. Practicality is something I have. I think it's not anything else.
As we sort of transition through your journey, after CAM, you went to arguably one of the finest educational institutions for film scoring, the Thornton School of Music at the University of Southern California. And I think in this case, the transition is more smooth compared to audio engineering to Western classical music. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and you can tell me so if I am, but sort of my image of Western classical music and film scoring, like they're both sort of orchestra centered and, string centered. So how do you think your training in Western classical music helped you in film scoring, and in what ways was it different?
Yeah, I mean, it's still gonna like head back into the same arc of a story. So if you think about it, it was 2011 to 2013 was sound engineering. 2013 to 2015 was KM, and all of my audio engineering skills had helped me in KM immensely. It sort of put me up there in front. And again, after that, it helped with having these orchestration skills and like how many skills to apply to the film scoring space. So it's like a step-by-step thing. I mean, it was like equally smooth or like equally harsh, as you say. But I mean, I feel that I didn't want to go to the US actually. Like the initial thought was to like stay on in India, and because I didn't have any funds anymore, and I just thought that I'll start off a studio in Chennai and like probably start working for AR or something like that, and just sort of start off my thing there. As usual, Amram House. So they said that you can't be like only a bachelor's holder. I mean, like you have to do postgrad in something or the other. So I was like, okay, I'll do it in this field, and I chose this. And I think it was, as hard as the earlier change was, because right now it was like also about transitioning into a Hollywood space, and to also transition into a space where it is, as you said, it is the best school for film scoring in the world. So after you get into that and you find that they take only 20 students each year, you feel happy at the start that, oh wow, I'm sort of in. And at the same time, you also feel that, oh my God, all these other students are so good. So there's like a huge ego drop as soon as you enter the program. And then you're like, everybody's so good. And like they're from all over the world actually. Our class was strangely a very international kind of a class where we had people from Hong Kong, China, Poland, Austria, Italy, and the States and England.
Oh, wow.
And it's just 20 of us. And I think I was the second person from India in the program of all time. So they aren't habituated to seeing people of our skin color also there. So it's also quite like interesting how it was just like one huge, what to call it. I mean, it's like everyone's in it with like sort of as much stake, and everyone is scared of the others, and all of us are trying to explore all of this in sort of like our own way. So like sort of every student had his or her own voice. So like the Asian students had so much of the East Asian harmonies in like all their tracks, and the Polish person had like some his like own voice, and the Italian person is from the same school as Ennio Morricone, so he has his own style and voice. So everyone was just so out there all the time that I think it was much more of an adjustment towards that as compared to actually training yourself in the orchestration part of it. And like it was actually trying to apply all your skills onto an actual orchestra. and to like an actual stage. So it was quite cool. That each day was sort of like an ego boost and an ego drop at the same time. Every day was just like an up down, up down, up down. So you're like, I don't know what to like do with this after a while. It's one of those things.
Yeah, and I want to dig into the sort of Indian inside an American context concept a little bit because in a previous episode of this podcast, I spoke with music director Ashwin Vinayagamurthy, who has scored for several American short films himself. And he told me that he encountered multiple situations where some Indian elements may come into his scores, but it would be immediately shut down and rejected because it sounded, quote, too Indian. So as an Indian yourself I know you've done Western classical music, but predominantly from an Indian background yourself. Was this influence ever an issue for you? And if so, how did you overcome it?
So I think all of these adjustment issues had like happened to me only in the first 3 months of the program. So I think the most sort of helpful part of the program is that you get to have scoring sessions every month. So a scoring session implies that you actually have your score played by an orchestra every couple of weeks. So it starts with like a smaller ensemble. So it ends up starting with like a string ensemble, and then it goes on to woodwinds, and then it goes on to only horns. After that, so it's sort of like the ensemble starts to keep increasing in size until you head into your final thing in April, in which you have an 85-piece ensemble playing your song. So I think early on, the idea is to scare all the students, to tell them that you have to do five scoring projects in 1 week. Just next, one by one, scene after scene after scene of just scoring. And it's okay to screw up, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to do all those things as long as your score is out in time. So you sort of start to find out that it's about submitting the piece as compared to submitting it well. Because even sort of after you submit it, it'll change on stage because the orchestra will play it differently, and so on and so forth. So I thought it would be exotic to get the string ensemble to play an Indian theme or whatever. So I tried that out in the first 1 month of the program. And also I think I had said that they hadn't had as much exposure to our community either. Because like in Hollywood also, I don't think that there are as many Indians in there. So they also had a hard time trying to adjust to me and all that. And plus I hadn't even altered my accent. So I was still speaking the same Indian accent all the time. So they had told me in the first string ensemble exercise that it is sounding slightly Indian. And I was sort of thinking, hey, but isn't that all right? After which I found out that everyone else there, even though they are from all parts of the world, all of them are still trained in Western classical harmonies. So I am sort of the only person who is trained in a set of harmonies that aren't known to them. So I mean, so like even the Chinese students have still learned only Haydn and Mozart and Bach. So it's the same school of thought. So I had this idea of ragams and all that stuff, right? So all that is not actually helpful in a certain environment. So example, if I had tried to force fit all these ideas into their tracks, it would sort of always feel that I'm trying to do something that's too far out and that's too hard to access. So I stopped that actually. So like I sort of placed all my Indian thoughts into like one attic of my head for like a year. So I said after the first string ensemble, I just changed all of my pieces to being completely Western. So and after that, I'd scored around 26 short films in 2 years, I think. And it was awesome because the first 18 of them were in the first year at the school itself. So like there also, I mean, it was like a strange experience also because the film makers from the SCA, that's the School of Cinematic Arts there, they find us from our profiles. at the program. So sort of even like in my profile, I'm holding a flute in my hand, so I seem like I'm Indian. And then my tracks hardly sound like Indian though. So it was like this sort of a hybrid kind of a vibe. So I think early on, I found out that all those filmmakers also aren't seeing me only for my skin color, and they are just seeing me for my tracks. So as long as I'm sort of able to not try to force the India in me all the time, it's fine. But if you just say that this idea is Indian, and you try and say no, I have to like add it into the I mean, like, somehow has to be added into the score, it will always be rejected. So I think it's always about the intent of your choice. And some of them are Indian projects that I got I mean, like I've done a couple of documentaries in which like they had like asked for some flute pieces to be played and so on. So there it's like okay to expose your skill in the Eastern harmonies, but apart from that, I think it helps to just stay true to the sound of the film that you're trying to score for. So if it is like an action film, then action score it and stop like Indians action scoring it. And if it's a comedy film, you score it. I mean, like so sort of each thing has like its own style, and you can't try to force fit India into everything. It is what I found out about that.
Yeah, and you just mentioned that you've scored for various films during your time at USC, and you're somebody that's not only scored for films, but also for plays and video games. So I'm wondering, with these sort of different mediums in which you're scoring music for, does your approach to these respective mediums change even if the situation is relatively similar? So, like, for example, say you have an action sequence in a film versus an action sequence in a play versus an action sequence in a video game. Does your approach change based on the medium?
No, because they sort of train you in that as well at the program, because they like tell you that it's all about the drama, right?
Mm.
So the drama is still the same. So like as you said, it's still an action sequence. So like the sort of action sequence is what we score at the end of the day. So like I have this thing in which I like helped my friend for his final project in sound engineering, where he took a scene from Ant-Man and he said that he wanted me to score it again, right? So like the sort of Ant-Man ending sequence is still an action sequence, except it feels like it's a game. Because like sort of Ant-Man is still like they change in size and then they go all over the place and they're playing with toys, and then the structures increase and change in size over and over again, and there's punches and hits. But like sort of at the sort of end of the day, it's still an action sequence. So an action sequence will always stay an action sequence irrespective of the output medium. So it's like saying that if you treat an action movie differently from an action OTT show, right? Or so it's sort of still the same, because I just see it as that.
So in your school, you sort of mentioned how they trained you in terms of how to approach an action sequence. Would you sort of have like, I don't know how to phrase this without making it too sort of strict, but would you have an idea of, or would they teach you sort of like, if it's an action film or action scene, use these instruments, use these sort of chords, use these sort of harmonies? How sort of scripted was that, and how much it was sort of natural instinct?
I think that so if you take a style, like say if you take like a sort of an uplifting is sort of an emotion that I'd like to approach, because if you try to make everything into like happy, sad, angry, it's sort of it's too like easy going on. I mean, I'd say if you have something that's a complex emotion like uplifting, and if you have to score uplifting, then you can score it in all kinds of ways with like an 80-piece orchestra or a solo piano or a solo voice or just an acoustic guitar and so on. So I think the instrumentation isn't as important as the emotion that you're trying to showcase. So I think the harmonies themselves speak, and after you know that all the harmonies work, it's only about having the choice of the accurate instruments in them. So I can show the same emotion in in so many different ways by changing the choice of instruments. So hence it was always helpful to ask the client about ask the client for his favorite soundtracks and ask him for his styles that he's expecting from the film. So like he'll say that he likes this Argentino sound, or say that he likes like a Hans Zimmer sound, or he likes like an empty Brokeback Mountain kind of sound. So it's sort of like his choice, because he is at the end of the day the person who's made the film, and he's made it with with like some thought in mind about it. So I just have to facilitate that emotion to come out accurately. So sort of an action scene is still an action scene, irrespective of how many styles you want to show it in, is 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 basically how I would see it. So it's not like they train you on the instrumentation aspect of it. So they actually only train you in the orchestra, and like how to like handle the orchestra and sort of all its ways, because like the orchestra is the most large instrument ensemble in the world, because like it has all of the frequencies, and it has all the instrument styles in it. So if you can kind of handle the orchestra, it means that you can handle all styles after that.
And yeah, after you studied film scoring in the US, you came back to India and you started producing various independent tracks. And I want to dig into two of them in particular, primarily because they're just two of my favorites, Madam and Oranga. So I'd like to start with Madam. And you spoke about Madam quite extensively on your Instagram Live with the rapper featured on the soundtrack, MC Heem.
Right.
And
Right.
there's one thing you said on there that I sort of want to hear more about, because
Right.
you said that, quote, evil is swag, when talking about the sort of darkness that you were trying to convey in the song. So, I mean, what do you mean by that?
So evil is swag. I mean, evil is swag, because if you sort of think about your favorite evil characters that you know all through in like either comic books or in movies, or even in Tamil, actually, like I'm like a huge fan of the early like the early Rajinikanth films, right? Like the old Rajinikanth films in which he is like the evil character, right? And I found that he is I mean, he has like himself said that he enjoys playing evil characters as compared to the happy heroes that he sort of ends up playing. And that's also because of his swag element, that you sort of enjoy his evil roles a lot, like sort of like he does them so well, that and playing like the hero is overdone. I mean, fine, you will like do like all the right things at the right time and be Superman all the time and save the world, but I mean, I think that evil sort of like evil has to be embraced, is what the theme of that song was. So I just thought that darkness is equally important as the other side. So I think if you have to show it, and if you have to show it effectively, it helps to stop making the track feel like it is dark and empty and sad and everything is over. It helps if it starts to feel almost swaggy, stylish, and happy evil, as compared to starting to feel like, oh, he's gonna end us all, as compared to he's gonna end us all. Wow. Right? So then it's like a whole different kind of way of trying to approach it, is why I said evil is swag. And I see Heem was awesome at that. I mean, like Heem was so effective in sort of talking about evil in that form. So hence I felt it was good. Rajinikanth is the most awesome example of that. He sort of acts out the evil parts extremely well. If you take any of the dark themes, even Voldemort is not as scary to me as Darth Vader, because Darth Vader has swag, and in that sense, yeah, just like take all your like evil characters from all the films. Joker, right? Like he had swag. Yeah, just all evil characters have to have. Like the icing on the cake of every evil theme is swag, is what I think I would say at the end of it.
And sort of continuing on that theme of darkness, the ending of Madam was very intriguing to me because there seems to be a bit of a trend nowadays, and the trend is to not end the song on the tonic, so to not end it on the sa. And Madam does very much of the same, and because it ends on the flat two or the lower re, which holds a lot of tension because it wants to resolve to the sa. So, just in general, why did he opt to end it with such a tense ending? And what do you think about the sort of general trend of ending the song on a note away from the tonic?
It's probably only something to do with every song. So if you take this song, it'll be about the fact that we wanted the song to keep the audience held and engaged all the way. I mean, like till the end. So if we've sort of established that the song is about this one evil guy, and if all of a sudden if we end the song on like this like extremely happy sour note, it'll feel like it's all over and like the problem has been solved. But except evil hasn't been solved yet because evil is still there and it's always all around us all the time. So I think it was sort of also about that, and it was also I think your second question is about how songs aren't ending the tonic. I feel that isn't the case because I think 80 to 90 percent of the songs I mean like are still like ending on the tonic only
Mm.
because it like helps the audience to accept that the song is over. Like to end something on I mean like on like a 5-1
Yeah.
is quite an obvious way to end songs. I don't think it's a style statement to end it off the tonic. I think it's more an application. It's something that you want the song to be. So it's more. I mean, like it is like saying that the song was completely in F major and I feel like ending it in A major. No, it's just that it would help if I ended it in A major because the arc of the song would be even more escalated and the audience would feel the way that I want them to feel. So I think it's almost like scoring. Scoring is also something I mean like in which the tonic is not really thought about as much. So I think in I mean let me like in like the states also I had exposure to all kinds of orchestral endings to cues, and if you hear any soundtrack, I don't think a soundtrack ever thinks about ending it on a tonic. It's because it's like the end of a scene.
Right, right.
So the sort of end of a scene is how I see the end of a song. So it's just that it has to be the end of that thought, but it doesn't mean that it's the end of all thoughts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think with sort of melodies, it's easier to establish a sort of emotion with it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think even in the live stream you spoke about how like I think it was Devati Ragam has
Yeah, it had
has
yeah,
the
it had some elements.
chromaticism and that sort of
Yeah,
brings about tension. But
yeah.
another aspect of Madam which I find interesting is the rhythmic component because there's everything from mridangam patterns to raw drums to sort of electronic trap beats. So to me it's easier to assign scales or notes to an emotion, but I struggle to assign rhythm to an emotion. So how do you think your treatment of rhythm in the song with so many sounds affected the emotional response?
So I think they always choose to say to me that in the orchestral space, you should always use the percussion at the end of everything because the percussion itself has no motion of its own, and I think only like harmonies have the true emotion, and that ends up coming from the strings or from the brass or from the woodwinds. And all this came from the intellectual snobs of the industry saying that you can't really have emotion from percussive instruments. So I think with percussion on its own, it's hard to have them applied and to still keep the emotion alive. But like if you take a score like Whiplash, like the score of Whiplash or the score of Birdman, in which it was all shot in one take and like the entire score is done with drums and stuff. I think the job of percussion is to only be the engine of the song. So if we have like an egg shaker and the egg shaker is playing all through the song, it sort of acts like your engine. So it always helps the song stay on. So like the audience is engaged, or like say if so many things are altering in the song, at least the egg shaker stays the same all through. So the audience is like, I know whom to snap to. I know what to sort of think is my click track, is my speed, and so on. I think if Matam was like a standard song, then it would be easier to just have one beat happening all the time. But except the end goal of that song is to exalt the concept of chaos. So if it's chaos, then it has to be everything thrown at you at odd intervals and like odd time signatures and so on. So I think the aim was also to catch the audience off guard there. So it was also like that. It was how it was intended.
Well, with darkness in mind, let's sort of flip the emotional spectrum and go to a bit more of a happier emotion with Urungu, which is a beautiful lullaby. And yeah, as I just said, this song is a lullaby and it depicts a mother's love for her child. And so, just on a conceptual level, since you're obviously not a mother yourself,
Yeah.
how do you go about expressing an emotion musically that you're not capable of feeling yourself? How does that work?
I mean, I don't think that you need to be able to feel all the emotions you score music for. I think that is step one.
Mm.
Because in that case, you were completely okay if I like scored an evil track, because you probably imply that I need that I'm evil myself. So you were like okay if I score evil, but how do I like score this motherly thing? I think that there's so many songs in like Hindi and Tamil on the I mean like on the same thought that, and I mean we've all had moms, right? So we've sort of had access to what they are like and how they feel, and I treat emotions as how like an audience would. So I like to see emotions like how you see shades on a canvas, right? So if we're talking about emotion of the mom, it was like also like strangely the first song I wrote also. So that song was written by me in Tamil. So it was just a thought actually I had, because I had seen this film called Umlangi Nights. It is a Kerala film that
Yeah.
came out early last year, and in that there's the song called Radha Girl actually, and that song had this quality of being about a very complex emotions shown in a very easy going way. So here also I had wanted to zoom in on one action, which is basically if a mother would like to put the child to sleep, she knows that her child is extremely beautiful even with like his or her eyes open, and she's also trying to close his eyes at the same time. So it's sort of her confusion of if the eyes should be open or closed, and at the same time also trying to put the child to sleep at the same time. So it has enough inside it as a sort of emotional thoughtscape that I don't think I have to be a mother to really find that out and to really be able to understand it. So it's almost the same as being able to absorb something that's evil, and then say I will act like I am the evil character, and then just try and do it. So it's the same way. I think it's just sort of being true to the emotion and true to the scene you're trying to show the audience. So I mean, like I'd like to sort of also say that it's my idea to make all my songs also like that, like sort of appear like it's a scene as compared to only a song.
Mm. And there's something interesting in the way you presented the song in terms of publishing, because the song has two versions. There's a shorter version that was released on YouTube, which is roughly 3.5 minutes long, and a longer version on Spotify and other such platforms, which is over 6 minutes. What was the reason behind this difference?
Because all of us have ADD, right? So all of us aren't able to hear songs for 5 minutes online all the time. So I just decided to upload the longer version as a song on Spotify, because like songs are easier to hear only as audio. But for the YouTube thing, I thought it was it. I mean, if you have to see something, even the visuals have to be as captivating for all that time. And I found that clip was not as captivating for more than 3 minutes because the story is still the same. It's still about some child who has to head to sleep, and it's still about the infant and the mom and the room, and that's all. So I thought that you can't really show that for too long. So I just thought I'll make two versions of the song. I have like a short version as the one that has the video, and the song in its whole form is on Spotify. That's easier to hear as a song. So it was more about something staying only oral and something being oral and visual at the same time.
I mean, here you're sort of talking about how how you think a listener or a consumer of your music will take in your content. Do you think the sort of, I don't want to say commercial, but I think I'll use that word anyways. But do you think the commercial aspect of publishing music has ever interfered with your sort of creative production process?
So it's two answers. So one is if it's for a client. So if it's for someone else, it will always have to, because it's always about someone else's dream and someone else's idea and someone else's thought and someone else's cash as well. I mean, like their investments and so on. If it's for myself, like all these songs are my own songs that I've released on my own. So I didn't really have to answer to anyone. So for that, I mean, like it's just how I see it. But it's sort of also about the arguments that's offered to me. So say if someone like my agency or someone just like comes up to me and tells me that it would be like I mean like helpful if the song is not 8 minutes long and it should be 5 minutes long, then I mean like just tell me why. I mean like, and I'll be able to accept the argument. So it's sort of also like if they like the argument makes sense and so on. Like yeah, it's that. And there is also the angle of even with commercial songs, they do work only because of a certain formula, right? So if you've heard a certain EDM song that you like, and they make 100 more songs like that, all of them are coming out all because the idea of that EDM style is working, and they all want to make songs like that. So I think as a composer, you have to be clear that your client is happy and that you're happy at the same time. So it shouldn't be a trade-off. I mean, like in which like one. So client comes first all the time. But say that if you're not like happy with the product either, then it doesn't like help you also. So I think you have to always toe the fence there and like see what's the best way out in all these regards.
And talking perhaps a bit more specifically about the song, there's one sort of point that I want to talk about because there's an interesting dynamic where the song's in 7/8, but there's this, I think it's an accordion. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but
Strings.
this sort of swell that comes in. Oh, it's the strings. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that sort of like fights against the foundational rhythm. So like it worked so well, but like what was that all about? Like how did you come up with that?
I think the truth is that sample was my friend who had played the strings for like some other song. So I just found that it was something that he had played for one of my other tracks, and that track isn't even in I mean like in the same speed as this track. So I just like happened to hear the two tracks at the same time, and I felt that string interlude over there might probably be able to be used here, and I found that it isn't in the same speed. And then I was like, so what if it isn't in the same speed? I'll just see how it works as a transitionary element. So it's sort of even in the function it plays in the song, it's just taking you out of the song for some time, and then it brings you back in again. So like the whole aim is to act as a transition, and since the whole song is 7/8, after a while it gets too boring, or I get too bored, so I keep adding in all these elements. And I've been like told also earlier that you get bored of all things generally, so you shouldn't feel like the audience also gets bored as fast as you. So if you have an idea, just slowly improve it and like alter it and so on. So yeah, I think it's just that.
Yeah, so it's been fascinating speaking about your work and your journey until where you are today. And yeah, I sort of want to wrap this interview up by talking about what the future holds for you. And rather coincidentally, A.R. Rahman sir had recently shared the trailer of a film for which you've scored the music, titled Freddy's Piano. So, what in general can we expect from that film? And could you briefly speak on your experiences working in that?
Sure. Firstly, I'd like to thank AR sir for tagging me. It's the first time that he's done that, so it's quite awesome that he studies sort of me like had a chance to see it and sort of also add in our names and like add to the promotion of the film as well. Freddy's is this interesting idea where Akash Prabhakar, who's the director and the actor of the film, had come to me with his whole idea of just making a very simple film about an older brother who wants to buy a grand piano for his younger brother. And it's just that actually, like the whole thought of the film is only that. So it handles issues of like school grades, it handles issues of the economy, it handles issues of how much they are able to afford, it handles issues of the age gaps between the older and the younger brother, and like the fact that they're also orphans, and so on and so forth. So also, like it's like a very short, intimate experience that I think hasn't been seen as much in our country. It's because our country is always about the plot line, and and we sort of always have this action-packed angle to everything. So I think here it was awesome that it was like only like this easy thought that had to be showcased, and it had like awesome options to explore in terms of the soundtrack and the score. It has enough themes. It's also in Western classical space, so it has a lot of options to explore that space as well. So I think it's something that hasn't been seen in our country as much. So I was also quite like excited by that. I would say it's sort of like imagine if we had a whiplash kind of a thing in India, in which it was more about the art form and about how to play the instrument against the backdrop of Pondicherry and cash issues and family bonds and all of that. So it was quite awesome to do that work, and also because it was not your standard score, so it had a lot of Western classical stuff happening, and you also add the Pondicherry sounds as well, because like you want it to also sound ethnic and Pondicherry like
Right.
there. So like it was quite awesome like that. So we had, yeah, I mean, like it'll come out in platforms quite soon, and I think it's a very intimate film that should make you smile at some point, because it's also about a very emotional thought of this older and this younger brother, and like how they like interact and speak and fight and argue and handle their lives. Apart from that, the stuff that I'm planning to do is essentially I have moved to Bombay now, and I have my studio here, and I've been actively, I mean, like, act, I mean, like, I've been acting, like, actively, like, hustling ever since I came here since August. It's been a combination of ads to short films to films to song releases in these last few months because of lockdown, and I haven't had anything else to do at that time, so I thought I'd release all these old songs from my attic. And I've found that all these songs are also getting like awesome responses from people. I mean, including you as well. So I thought songs are the way to go, and I do have plans to come out with a lot more commercial, easygoing kind of song content, because it will not be as experimental as the others. I also came out with a playlist
Yeah.
called Ambient Introspection
Yeah.
that was basically also from the attic of LA, because all those are other scores I had done over there. Yeah, so I think that the aim is even with the idea of Aga House, the whole aim is to make the styles of music to make music genre free, right? So I think the emotion of the music has to be more important as compared to the style of the instruments. So I think all of your questions in terms of does like action music always have to be strings, or does like happy music always have to be the flute? I think all these questions have to eventually stop, and all of us have to start to just think about: is the music putting like a smile on my face, or a tear in my eyes, or some goosebumps on my hands or not? Because I think at the end of the day, as long as I can acquire an emotional reaction from the audience, so I've still achieved what I like started to achieve. So like the whole aim was to create so that you can make the others feel something. So as long as someone can feel something, I'm doing well. So all these other questions about harmonies and instrumentations and all is useless, because we're eventually only trying to, offer like some kind of an emotional escape to the audience in times like these, where we're like, also it's very hard now. Like in the last few months, everyone's like in all kinds of emotional spaces. So I think it's helpful to offer our art as an appropriate escape to all the audiences. So if they would like a dark escape, then you have the evil hip hop songs. If you want a happier escape, or something else, and so on. So I think songs are awesome at that. Scores are as well. So scores and songs are the way to go. The aim is to hopefully do them at the same time, and also to ensure that the Indian audiences are open to all kinds of styles and all kinds of art forms, as they once were actually early on. All of a sudden, the Indian audiences are being asked to only listen to a certain kind of music, and I think that the onus is on the artists to ensure that they offer more, because only if the artists offer more, the audiences will have a chance to also accept more and also evolve as like the art evolves and so on. So yeah, it's just that. So the aim is to just take art forward in the most productive way for humanity to like also see it like that. So also that's like, so art is not only for artists, it's for all of us. So it needs to be easy to access and accept and have fun with it. Yes, essentially we need to have fun with it, is what is the important argument I want to also make. So it isn't only about happy, sad, angry, it's also about having fun.
So we've talked about how you've allowed other people to have fun with your music. Now, with the sort of final question that I generally ask all of my guests, let's flip it. I want to hear what sort of music you have fun with. So what's on your playlist nowadays?
Also, my playing list nowadays, I'm listening to this Jacob Stauber. Is that what his name is? Yeah, he's pretty interesting. So he has this cool electronic jazzy kind of sound happening. Apart from that, I listen to all kinds of stuff, man. I listen to everything from item songs to EDM songs to Coldplay to Andhra, hero entry songs to orchestral songs, Hans Zimmer to anything like it just goes all over the place. So I think I think I should stay true to how I'm expecting my audience. So I should stay true to how I expect my audiences to be. It is that I don't want it to be about the songs. It should be just about the emotion. So I just hear stuff that makes me happy, or stuff that puts a tear in my eye, or if it's like an old Raja song, if it's an old A.R. Rahman song, it's okay. It's just that. So my Spotify playlist also will change every day, because sometimes early in the morning if I have to work out, I will hear some South Korean hip hop, and that's like always fun. And yeah, it just keeps altering.
All right, I think we'll finish off there. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the listeners for tuning in. If you're not following Prashant on his social media already, make sure to go do so with the links in the description. Thank you so very much. Well, that was Prashant Srinivas on today's episode of the Indoencers podcast. You can find us at The Indoencers, spelled THEINDOENCERS, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or you can use the links in the description. Likewise, you can find our homepage at theindoencers.wordpress.com or through the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the Indolences podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time.